Frank Aquila is a partner at Sullivan Cromwell, and he says media deals will be plentiful and complex as media companies respond to the challenges resulting from new media and the recession. He joins us now with his outlook for mergers and acquisitions. Frank, great to have you back on the show.
Good to see you. Good afternoon.
Very good afternoon to you as well. Let's begin with media, and why is this industry in particular so ripe, possibly, for takeover, M&A? We heard Patricia just give us the latest on NBCU and possibly being picked up by Comcast.
Well, I think to a certain extent, media has been going through a lot of difficult changes, and probably a year ago would have sort of meandered along, and some would have gotten it right and some wouldn't, given the shock to the system that we had a year ago and the recession and the continued softness in the economy. Old media, and cable now really is part of old media, is struggling on what's the business model to succeed against new media. And I think a lot of these deals are going to be really attempting to get the right mix of assets into companies, not necessarily knowing what the future is going to be, but having a range of different options to create value over time.
What is the right mix of assets? Is there a media company out there doing it right? Porter Bibb was on yesterday, and I've interviewed him as well in the past, and he suggested Disney, especially now that they picked up Marvel.
You know, I think anyone who says they know exactly what the right mix of assets are, you know, other than Mike Bloomberg and Bloomberg having the terminals, and that's a great source of revenue, most media companies don't have a guaranteed source of revenue that's going to continue. I think, you know, Disney obviously wanted to have a broader range of assets. Clearly, that's what's motivating the talk on some of these other deals, but the point is, if you have a broader range of assets, you're more likely to have the right mix of assets in your portfolio.
So what's a likely price tag for NBC Universal?
You know, you hear all sorts of numbers out there. I think particularly with media companies, it's very, very difficult, because if you look at the last 12 months, revenues have been way off. If you look at some of the potential issues that they're facing going forward, those are not very bleak. On the other hand, if you have a name, a trademark that has great value that can maybe transfer to the web and to other new media.
Let's talk figures here, Frank. 20 to 35. It's a wide range.
I'm not a banker.
I know, but you work with the bankers. You're always asking them questions.
It's going to be. It would be a healthy number. Definitely a healthy number.
You wrote a piece in Business Week magazine entitled "M&A Behind the Boom in Unsolicited Bids." What's up with this trend picking up?
Well, I think one of the things I've seen, given that I started my career in the early 80s, and in those days you saw corporate raiders and whatever. Now you're seeing household names like Kraft and PepsiCo, Microsoft and InBev, all making unsolicited bids. In part, it's because they have the cash to do it. Also, because of institutional shareholders pressuring companies, they've dismantled a lot of their takeover defenses. So the target companies become, of course, much more receptive, because they need to be, and there's more respectability to it. When, you know, household names are launching unsolicited bids, people think about it a little bit differently.
And why do you say that you see an increase in corporate cash? You see a rise there, and that's specifically with the acquiring company. What is that a result of?
You know, last year, you go back to where we were at the beginning of October a year ago, and GE couldn't even sell its commercial paper at that point. And, you know, people were really frantic. Companies went out and really cut, and they conserved cash. They stopped their share buyback programs, even though share prices were very, very low. And so you went from the S&P 500 companies a year ago having $600 billion in cash to $700 billion. So they've effectively added in excess of $100 billion.
Wow.
And these companies that have added the cash can also borrow at historically low rates. Okay. So it's an optimal time.
Interesting stuff today. Frank Aquila is a partner in the Mergers and Acquisitions Group of Sullivan Cromwell Law Firm. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to see you.
Have
a good weekend.
Likewise. Bye.